And we welcome you back. Lobbying by those for and against the Iranian nuclear deal continues in full force inside of Washington, D.C. and out. But no matter what happens with the pending congressional review, 3 former colonels, all who served in Iraq, say the United States must uphold its promises to Iranian dissidents. Those 2 colonels and 1 lieutenant colonel authored a new op-ed piece about a key group of Iranian refugees living in a place called Camp Liberty right across the Iranian border inside Iraq. And joining me right now, Colonels Wesley Martin and Thomas Cantwell. They both served as commandants of Camp Ashraf, where these dissidents lived before they were moved to Camp Liberty. Thank you both for being here with us today.
We appreciate it.
All right, let's start with you first, Colonel Martin. Talk to us about Camp Liberty and the reality of the situation on the ground presently.
Camp Liberty was originally built to house the American division in Baghdad, and the Americans lived there, and it was designed only as a housing area at night, then we'd go and do our work during the day. I lived at Camp Liberty when I was the operations chief for detention operations. Unfortunately, now 2,500 people have been consolidated into those trailers designed strictly for sleeping and basic lodging, and now they're compressed in such a small area, and they've taken rocket attacks 3 times from the Iraqi government, who has claimed that, oh, well, we didn't know who did it. You don't drive around Baghdad back in 2013 with 280 millimeter rockets mounted on vehicles.
Sure.
It was done by the Iraqi government. And now living under extremely difficult positions, constant food blockades, not being allowed access to medical treatment that they need. It's just a continual story of harassment by the Iraqi government.
Well, Colonel Cantwell, I want to take a look at something specifically you guys have written. Quote, disturbingly, the West has exercised silence in order to avert angering Tehran. Similarly, the West has remained silent about Tehran's drastic human rights violations inside that country. So these Iranian dissidents, disliked by the Iraqi Shia-led government, disliked by the Shia-led government inside Tehran as well. But a lot of proponents of the deal say, look, the United States overlooks a lot of human rights violations in places like Saudi Arabia and Qatar. What is different? What makes these human rights violations by Iran any different?
Well, there are several significant differences. First of all, the U.S. military, and in particular, I was an agent of this as a military police commander in 2003, was responsible for concentrating these people and disarming them in 2003. We declared them as protected persons under the Geneva Convention in the following year. And so we were committed to protect them then as refugees. And then we signed a 4-party agreement with the United Nations, the Iraqi government, and these people in 2009, 2010. And as part of that, we agreed to see that these people were safely repatriated. We've done virtually nothing but stall on that agreement since we signed it. And so, in my mind, we have a couple of questions. The first is, are we going to live up to the agreement that we made? And the second one, more important to me, is, are we going to live up to our moral responsibility since we disarmed these people, since we turned these people over to the Iraqi government, and since we've stood by and watched some 100 of them get slaughtered in the last few years? Are we going to live up to our moral obligation to ensure that these people get moved to safety?
And that's an excellent point. You know, a lot of folks in this country, and we're talking about this group, the MEK, we've heard about them a little bit in the media here in the United States, but not a lot. And whether or not anyone knows anything about that particular group of Iranian dissidents, you bring up a good point, Colonel. As a country, we have an obligation to stand behind the decisions and the agreements that we had made prior to this particular time. Now, Colonel Martin, let me ask you specifically, do you think in more general terms we need to be more consistent to our obligations in the Middle East as a whole?
We do, and we have, this administration has not, every opportunity it has had to fail and make the wrong decision, it's done that. You look through the entire Middle East, we have not made a correct decision yet. And here's the group, and my good friend Tom pointed out, we made written agreements with these people. In the military, we're bound by 3 words. They're called duty, honor, country. Unfortunately, U.S. State Department does not honor those 3 words, and it's whatever is the expedient thing to do at the moment. That's how they ended up at Liberty. That's how they ended up in this current situation. They have kept every promise they made to us. We have broken every promise we've made to these residents.
Gentlemen, we would like to continue the conversation. Unfortunately, we're coming up against a commercial break here. We're going to ask you to stick around for a little bit longer. We'll have more of our interview coming up here on Newsmax Now with Colonel Wesley Martin and Colonel Thomas Cantwell talking about the Iranian dissidents right now living in Iraq and the difficult situations that they are going through. We're going to talk a little bit more in depth about the particulars of the Iranian nuclear deal with them. Stay tuned for that. We'll have that coming up at a later date.